Today, we're going to talk about how your certification is really a ploy to get you to spend money on an ongoing basis to keep that piece of paper, which generally speaking does not give you the qualifications, credentialing, and systems to go run and grow a business that's going to be fruitful for you. Before you go in and you do this whole like, oh, but don't you guys charge monthly? Yes, we do. $97 a month. And for that, you get certifications, education around coaching and business and finances and everything in between, as well as systems and software to actually run your business. Literally every single thing you need for $97, not hundreds, not thousands, not 10,000, not 25,000, but literally everything you need for $97. So Andrew, talk to us about this credentialing subscription service that exists out there.
Well, I'm sure that some of our listeners have probably heard the term SaaS before, which stands for software as a service. And we're looking at adopting more of a CaaS model, which maybe this will be the place where that gets coined and NASM and everyone else can jump on the bandwagon of making this stuff affordable, accessible. Because, I think that when it comes to continuing education as a cornerstone, it's important that we take a second to understand why it's in place. And it's generally speaking things that are relevant to specific trades because industries change, technologies emerge, new things.
So you mentioned that actually, like my father, who's an electrician, he has to go and get his license renewed and go through coursework and everything like that. Literally it's 2 or 3 years. He's got to sit through, I think it's 40 hours of coursework in order to keep his license. So it's, as you say that out loud, it's not just trainers, it's everybody. It just dawned on me.
Anyone that needs to maintain a certain quality and a standard of care or like a certain work output, if you will, they are required, generally speaking, if there's some kind of governmental oversight, and there's definitely a bit of a racket when it comes to that, because sometimes when people put in price caps, for an example, Walmart or, some kind of industry wide will say like, hey, we can't charge more than $15 for a set of light bulbs. Well, if people were charging $12 or $10 now, what that means is they're going to basically bump their margins all the way up to the minimum. And so that's how inflation and price discrepancies kind of start to creep in when regulation comes in and says, hey, don't charge more than this. Well, now the people that were charging less than might jump all the way up to that minimum, and that creep may continue to extend over time. And we see a lot of that in the education space where there's a flooding of people that are not qualified to have an opinion on certain metrics. And not to take away from people that have a lot of experience, I think that that's very warranted. And I think that we should have routes for credentialing that are experientially grounded. But people that just get experience at the expense of understanding and any kind of formal education, generally speaking, are going to lack depth the same way that we know when ChatGPT offers you certain things, it's brittle because it doesn't have the depth of information. And that's one of the reasons that it becomes dangerous. And so when we're finding that all these peptide courses,
ChatGPT these days and like helping with workouts and stuff is getting wild. I'm like, I don't know what happened to you. I feel like you're going backwards, not forwards. And it's a brainstorming partner for me. It's not what's dictating the workouts, but it's like, as you mentioned that with it, I'm like, where did we go so far away from the guidelines that I've given you as we've gone down this journey together? And I feel that I'm having to go back to like literally the basics to try to get it back on track just to help me brainstorm stuff to do. So you're spot on with how AI in general with some of these things is just introducing an entirely new level of chaos there too.
Yeah. And that's part of the reason where, like the same analogy of seeing yourself in the mirror every day, you don't realize how much your body changes month over month, year over year, which is why progress pictures on occasion are really helpful for people to see what they were like a month ago or last time they were in a bathing suit or what have you, and appreciate how far they've come. That's called drift, effectively, where you kind of don't notice these small incremental changes over time. And when we think about the nature of AI and how it'll slowly start to appropriate the conversation and steer it in a direction, that's definitely going to require and a caution against people just leveraging and using AI without any deep subject matter expertise. This is why professional trades and stuff are going to actually, I think, see an increase in a resurgence of hiring after people realize that AI is likely, just as likely to lead them astray because of the nature of the training and the programming of kind of affirming and that sycophantic, like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Like that shit will actually get people to start to think they're amazing, and at the cost of accuracy or effectiveness. So when you think about people that are selling $1 peptide guides, i.e. Impact Health Network, fucking trash, it really does lend itself to the scrutiny that we're starting to see emergent research come out of, like, hey, peptides aren't really all they're cracked up to be, unfortunately. I have a lot of questions around that because it's still early inside of the mainstream adoption and research kind of exploration with a lot of those for your people that aren't in vulnerable populations, that aren't in a diseased state, right? But when we start thinking about that stuff, it's how we didn't have research to substantiate this. How are people writing courses on the matter when physicians and everyone else are lagging behind? And it's not to condescend or say like, oh my gosh, you shouldn't do that, because it does require pioneering. But guys, like, if you don't have any deep subject matter expertise in endocrinology or like how the body works because you said science sucks, I don't think that you should ethically be charging people for something that doesn't exist yet. Like, it's not ethical.
So when we think about the CEC, is like, I hear you on the, it helps keep you on the straight and narrow of understanding the information and continuing down that road. And I would agree. Like, when I was certified as a trainer almost 20 years ago, was my first weekend certification course. And then you go for your subsequent CECs and you learn more and different things and you dive deeper into it, corrective exercise specialist and all of that stuff for 2 days. I always remember coming out of there going like, I'm corrective exercise. Like, or I went for, I think it was ISSA, like a kickboxing thing, which was a step below like gym class kickboxing just for cardio, but I do kickboxing. And I look back and like, I don't regret going through those things, but I also look at the amount of money that I spent on these things that were pitched to me as a way to keep my main core certification, but they also didn't really bridge the right gap that I needed. But it also just kind of, it made me believe like I'm a better trainer because I now can hold a kick pad the right way. Like, it was just, I look back and I'm like, all right, there's definitely a money grab in there. And listen, it's business. You got to make money. I don't disagree with that sentiment, but like from an accreditation standpoint, what does it look like to still be accredited? What are requirements typically? And maybe it varies. I don't know this, but what does that look like? Like, what is real in terms of needing to continue to learn in that world?
Well, and it depends on what certifying body you're discussing. Like the ACSM and the NSCA are two of the organizations that are preferential to me, as well as the ISSN, the International Society of Sports Nutrition. Jose Antonio does a lot of great independent primary research over there through his lab, Nova Southeastern, and like they really do give a lot of platforms, and frankly, like they drastically undercharge for what they deliver. And, there's not as much course material and stuff, but, I think it does really come down to the fact of what is necessary and how often do things change. That would necessitate what these evidence-based practice kind of organizations that differ from NASM and ISSA, which are, they'll create like a bodybuilding prep course that, loosely has like to give you a clear example, they created a DNA course, the ISSA did. And this was in 2020. And I was seeing a young lady at the time that was working at ISSA, and, she was, I think, in the customer service realm, and she had she was just kind of curious. I think she was looking at being a personal trainer at the time. She took their DNA-based coaching exam, and she didn't know anything about DNA, methylation, anything like that. She took the exam and she passed it. And she didn't even read any of the course material. And if you can pass something like that, and you're supposed to have a subject matter expertise as a way of credentialing and saying, hey, cool, now you're a DNA-based coach, like what rigor is there really? And what separates that person from being able to understand?
Hey, she might have on accident and luckily just guessed all the answers right, Andrew. It is possible.
I mean, I think it was like 50 questions, and I imagine the margin of error is 80% usually for these things. So she can win.
Is it so 50 questions true and false, or 50 questions multiple choice?
Probably multiple choice, because the lengthier, like the short form and the long form blanks, you now have to have someone manually go in there. And let's be honest, like they were charging $50 for these courses and shit. So
You got a 20% per question chance if there's 5 potential answers of guessing it
they do
right.
4. They usually do 4.
So 25% to the 50th power of percentages. So I'm not sure what that number ends up being, but I'm going to ask AI while you keep going real quick.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I do know that they ran into a lot of issues of people in India circulating the test answers. And so when you think about the inflated number of people that are ISSA, the easier something is to get, the less prestigious it tends to be, because there should be a weeding out process for people that are contraindicated for the job. Not everyone needs to be a physician. And in fact, if you fail your entrance exams and, like, let's say that you just have a very low SAT score, not to say that you're dumb, but your crystallized intelligence may not be conducive for someone being as successful, worth the 500K investment, to come out the other side and not pass their boards. And now they can't practice, but they have a degree, and they struggled and had all this stress and sleep deprivation and all these other things for 5 years. So there are gating criteria that are intended to align people to be best equipped for the job that they're moving into. And, I think people don't like to be told no, and it puts us in a weird place sometimes of, you just don't have that skill set, and I'm bad.
In case you were wondering, Andrew, the percentage of guessing everything properly is 7.89 times 10 to the negative 29th.
Ooh, that's like
is the answer. So it's point
0.00029.
A lot of zeros, like 20 of them, 789.
Yeah. So if you get the right person in India, you can be part of that 0.789. But so when you think about one of the reasons why people don't hold personal trainers in high regard and high esteem, is because it has such a low barrier of entry, and there's not a lot of discretionary, or there's not as much differentiation between these people, which is why people will certify it. They'll stack certifications in a way to suggest that they might be more competent. I was one of those people. I didn't want to have to justify my value. So here we are 74, 75 certifications later, and tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt just from these certifications over the years. I really do regret having done that. But I will say that, for instance, I think CrossFit was a really valuable one because it was very experientially based. You can't fake being in a room and having a coach and going and taking people through these drills. And I think that that's where a lot of certifications and learning are really going to take on a new light, is this live version of getting feedback and having to do the skill versus saying, hey, knowledge check, you understand what a peptide is, whatever. And obviously some of these things are not controlled substances, but they're controlled substances in the way that you can't necessarily get widespread experience in a short period of time like you can with coaching and interacting with people and peopling. So, but I think your original question was what makes, what are some of the criteria that have to be present for a CEU?
Yeah, like I guess at the end of the day, what if you're part of NSCA?
This got me fucked up right now.
Whatever it is, like if you're part of that, how often do they, as a certifying body, require you to get a certain amount of hours or interactions or whatever they quantify like the CEU numbers as? Like what does that look like? You have to spend 30 hours every 2 years practicing your craft? Like, just, I guess, break that down, because I'm naive and don't know.
So different organizations have them different ways. I think generally speaking, best practice is to have somewhere around 60 continuing education hours across 2 years. I believe the NSCA and the ACSM, the National Strength and Conditioning Association, by the way, if you're listening, you know what that is, or the American College of Sports Medicine. I think that they're probably two of the more evidence-based and rigorous credentials that you can find. Unfortunately, both of which do require degrees to have. And I don't hate that. But it's usually 2 years and 60. I think they do it 6.0. They're usually done in units, in increments of contact hours, right? So if you do a quiz, which you can do quizzes, you read a research article, you can take a quiz through the NSCA for part of your CEUs. They kind of break those up into different domains, like courses, conferences, reading materials. They'll break it up like that. And they don't let you concentrate all of your things in a single domain. new certifications are also a part of that. Now, we'll say that this is where, to your point, the ethical boundaries of charging and creating a system that feeds itself. I do think that continuing education is important from an emerging research and stuff perspective. Just because these organizations create things, processes, products, systems, information that fill that gap, I don't think that that's inherently an evil thing or we shouldn't do that. I do think that if an organization is spitting out a new certification every 3 to 6 months and it hasn't gone through a vetting process and it doesn't demonstrate a clear need inside of the industry or a way that it adds significant or clear value from an ROI perspective, I think that that becomes the unethical borderline. And that's why I'll go after NASM and ISSA, because they do seem like they're a little more predatory. They're constantly running sales on these things. I used to teach the NASM curriculum while I was a training manager at Lifetime. And again, when I think about standing on a single leg to do standing on a Bosu ball with a single leg to do bicep curls is functional, get the fuck out of here, dude. That's not helping anybody, unless maybe you're training to be a single leg fucking
You burn
pirate.
more calories though, bro.
And so, yes, and I will say I am biased towards actually having your training be useful and effective and getting you to do things that are above and beyond your current ability level, not just look a certain way. But there are people that could make that argument that if it's just about caloric expenditure and enjoyment, sure. But if it's about caloric expenditure and enjoyment, give it 10, 20, 30, 40 years. As you age, you're going to regret not chasing function, not being able to do more things, because you are inherently going to be less capable and able as you age if you don't train it. You don't use it, you lose it. So, that's my caffeinated soapbox on
diatribe on this. And the thing is, I agree, right? Continuing to learn is an important thing. I don't do great under structure and rules. I'm sure you know this about me. But I am very self-motivated to go learn and tinker and all of those things, right? I don't think the world should be as self-motivated as I am, because there's also a distraction problem that comes with that. Let me throw that out there. But if you are self-motivated to go learn and you're doing those things, I do believe there should be a way for you to test and prove I'm continuing to refine my craft. And you should be able to pay a bare minimum fee, whatever the case may be, at the core item that you ended up testing for to begin with, right? Like in my mind. So your CPT, your trainer, your nutrition cert, whatever it might be, if you're continuing to learn and you can go back and keep passing that test, even with the iterations that happen over time based upon evolution and learning and whatnot, I feel like, hey, that should be sufficient enough. You're proving a continuation of your skills. But if you have to go back and pay hundreds of dollars for all of these things every 2 years consistently, and the only way is by their very specific structured stuff, that's where I think who a little more resistant to structured learning system, just say I think I have a problem with it, because from that perspective, it's just more, you need to go learn. Now, again, if that's the only way you actually go do the thing, I think that's fantastic. And that's hey, go get it done, spend your 30 hours a year learning the thing. And if that costs you more money, hey, cool. But I can tell you right now, with a high degree of certainty, I have way more tabs open on my computers than anybody should. I'm learning every single day. And I could probably be put against the best of the best on some of the things that I get to work on, right? So my thing would be, you should go learn outside of the boundaries that these things force upon you. But at the same point, continuing to learn should be a requirement if you're going to at all lead other people, give advice, or help people achieve certain outcomes. Because what we knew to be true 3 years ago, there's things that are not true today anymore. And if you're not keeping up with it, that's a problem.
Well, and on that point, I think that, some organizations only require you to restart every 5 years. Some do it every annually. I think PN is also another 2 years. And so when you think about the speed of these things, largely those are contingent upon the speed of change and updates and outputs, how quickly things change. And to give you a frame of reference, the NSCA just came out with their newest, I think it's the 5th edition of their Essentials of Strength and Conditioning book. And the last version was in 2014. So it's that's 12 years, and so they're going to have to now update their certification materials, the way they go about these things. And if people are curious, we do use the we do use that book as a seminal source for our fitness program design coaching certification, because it is so thorough and well written that we borrow a lot of the principles from there that are universal, that they've done a great job in compiling. And obviously we then overlay a fair amount of the other experiential things on top of those principles. We don't necessarily agree with everything they say, but I would say it's like a 60-40 split of the new stuff versus the stuff that's rehashed, that's principally based, that is grounded in decades, if not centuries. I mean, potentially depends on how far back you want to go, but even Greco-Roman and the Olympics, like, fitness and training are not new per se, but they definitely have seen significant evolution across, however long we've been tracking it. But yeah, I mean, if you're not, they say you should upcycle your technology every 3 years. I think that you should definitely be pursuing some kind of credential or some kind of formal education program on top of some kind of experiential educational experience. Because if you learn but you don't do, you're going to be at a huge disadvantage. If all you do is do and you never learn, you're going to be at a huge generalizational kind of limitation where you're not going to know what to do outside of the use cases that you've seen directly in front of you. And the way that CEUs effectively work is they create a base. If you just hit those minimum standards, you're not going to be great in your craft. I don't think. You're going to need to, if you want to be at the top and if you want to build a brand and you want to be renowned for something, be on peptides and do social media, or deliver really great results as a function of how well you can get someone to their goal as quickly as possible. But, I'd say that those are probably my biggest guiding criteria when it comes to CEUs. CECs, continuing education units, continuing education credits. You'll hear them used interchangeably.
It's all a scam. People are just trying to take your money from you. Fuck the world.
Could be. Yeah, absolutely.
So,
there's an element.
anyways, yeah, I think if you're spending time, effort, energy, money, resources, whatever, on continuing to learn, continuing education, credits, units, whatever, it should be worthwhile. I do believe there's a large majority of people out there that are leveraging that as a way to create profitability for their business. I'm not saying you should get it for free. There is a cost of that good being sold associated to that business that they need to recover, and you are in business to go ahead and make a profit. So from that side of things, like very, very directly, it shouldn't be free, especially with all the free resources that are available that you're choosing not to leverage. That's on you. But there are companies that are thinking profit first, and that's where I have the problem at the end of the day, where this is supposed to be about a field, about an industry that's generally speaking providing a service, helping others, whatever the case may be. And it just comes down to the money grab of continuing. And that's like, I mean, the CEC stuff, probably $100, $300 is a reasonable thing where people are charging that stuff. Fine, whatever. You start getting into hundreds and thousands of dollars on these things. And I'm not even bashing these $25,000 masterminds right now, right? Like, this is directly when you're spending thousands of dollars that are going to go help you towards your education crediting situation. That to me is absurd. And that's one of the big things and the big cornerstones that we're not here to do. We want to make sure you have the education, you have the knowledge, you have the experience, you have the tools you need for something that's extremely affordable and plannable in terms of your own world. And that's why we're sticking to our $97 a month.
And to give you a frame of reference, like, people now, I hope the question starts to become, well, obviously these things cost money. And yes, the way that you determine if something's predatory or not is how much evidence it has to support it and how quickly and how long something has been proven and tested. And if it hasn't been proven and tested for, I'd say at least 5 years, that you can create a really reasonable resource that is grounded in some certainty, it's predatory, right? It's all speculative. It's something that might potentially come with inherent risks that the people that are creating these things may not be informed on. And that's really the thing that we want to avoid, because smoking used to be cool until we realized it caused lung cancer, and vaping kind of the same thing. We're realizing that it causes a lot of health issues, right? And so you don't want to find yourself on the other end of that, where now you have to go back and, God forbid, pay out a class action lawsuit because you're one of the people that's like, hey, I have a peptide company. Yeah, I wouldn't absorb that legal. And there's a reason why we don't deal in that particular business, because it is so immature. Yeah, I'd say that's how you would determine if something's predatory or not, and really your criteria and your no-go criteria. If it hasn't been around for a while and if they can't give you references for some educational content material, and it's not extensive and it doesn't have several different meta-analyses or systematic reviews, preferably meta-analyses, that substantiate their methodology and why they suggest what they suggest, you're getting ripped off.
Yeah.
We provide all that stuff whenever people request it for our courses, and we often have excess of usually like 120 plus references that ground our evidence-based approach. And so, make sure you're asking for those things. And if the salesman doesn't want to give them to you, save your money. You're going to save yourself a lot of grief.
Agreed. Well, hey, gang, we appreciate you jumping on today, listening, joining us here at Beyond the Pump, where we break down the business of fitness and nutrition. Subscribe to the channel, watch the episodes. We're here to provide a ton of value. If you guys need anything, reach out. If you want us to talk about a topic, throw the comment down below. We'll see you guys next time.
Peace.